Welcome to the HIT Podcast, HIT, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As we do every week, we are dropping into your feed with what I hope are bite-sized, digestible, well-curated conversations going on in the space. This week's episode will be no exception. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, I get into it with Tommie Jo. Hey, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I think, just to kind of give the audience a little orientation to, who is Tommie Jo, what you professionally kind of, what, your acumen is, and sort of give us the nickel tour about how you get in the chair today.
Absolutely. I am an employment attorney by trade with a big emphasis on workers' comp and disability, absence from work, career long. And the last few years, I've really been focused on not practicing law, but solving problems before they start. So everything in the employment and HR space, how do we not make it complicated, not make it difficult and expensive? How do we stop problems before they begin?
How do we stop problems before they begin, Tommie Jo?
I'm so glad you asked. All kidding aside, I think the secret sauce is culture. Of course, we're people, right? It's human resources, so nothing is perfect, like any other relationship. But I think if we focus on culture, which really means our people relationships, are we courteous? Not do we always tell people yes, but are we genuine? Are we authentic? Do we look people in the eye and just give it to them straight? Those kinds of basic communication skills, I think that's the start of everything good. And in fact, when those things go wrong, that's usually the start of everything bad in the employment relationship.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know how accurate this is, but there's some like joke about doctors that get sued for malpractice, and it's so much more often like their bedside manner than their actual diagnosis, sort of a thing. So where things went sideways was just how they came across, not necessarily what they did. But I'm curious to ask you, so this is where you start. I'm interested to start here because I agree with you, right? I think you said authenticity, genuineness, looking people in the eye. If you're the owner of the company, maybe you exude that. If you're, some version of, C-level person, maybe that's second nature to you. How does a company or an interested HR person say, I like that, I agree with that, I wish that was part of our culture? Like, how do you disseminate to your managers, hey, be genuine, right? Like, how do you literally build culture?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think it starts with one person at a time and one relationship at a time. So just like any other interpersonal relationship, if a marriage is bad, it probably didn't break it down in a day or two. And so it goes with work. And so you don't fix it in a day or two, but you do start.
Mm-hmm.
Journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, let's recognize that for anybody in leadership, second shift supervisor, whoever it is, right? Whoever the person is, you might be the face of management. So
Mm-hmm.
so take that seriously and be honest with yourself about what am I communicating? You're probably very aware of what you say in a formal memo, but what's your facial expression? If somebody walks in your workspace or maybe you have a little pod with only three walls, or maybe you have a beautiful office or anything in between, if I'm typing away on my computer and someone walks in and says, "Hey, you got a minute?" And I say, "Yeah, go ahead," but I never even look up.
Yeah.
What am I telling them? I don't have a minute, or I don't care, or something other than warm and fuzzy, right? So that's where it starts. We got to be honest about what message am I sending to people at a really simple, basic human level.
Can I ask you a question you might not even be able to answer, which is not how I typically start a question? But when you talk about a second shift person and they might be the face of management to the folks that they interact with, that made me think about like the degree of professionalism that one brings to the table, right? And so you're basically asking that person, hey, be a person that cares, right? Like, and I just wonder, like, culturally, or, I hate to sound like an old man yelling at the clouds, but like these kids these days, sort of thing. Like, do people still care that they are improving and bettering and bettering and bettering and professional? And what does professionally even mean? And like, where are those lines and are they blurring? And I'm not even sure that's a question, but if that teases something out of you, let me know your thoughts on all that.
Well, let me try. One of the things that seems to be timeless and well preserved from one generation to another is respect.
Yeah.
So yes, my daughter, who is 24, has a real different view of what a quote good place to work looks like than I do. Probably different than you do. That's fair, and we have to tune into those details a little bit by doing simple, inexpensive things like talking to people. But to your point, it's it's we need to find out what are they looking for. Now, we might mistakenly believe, well, everybody wants a bundle of money or everybody wants really expensive training, or, well, they might want those things. What people really want is they want to go to work and they want to give you an honest 8 hours or so, and then they want to go home and they don't want to be mistreated while they're there and they don't want to play games. They don't want to be given a bad time about taking PTO if they have it and they've earned it. They don't want the slacking coworker to get by with everything and never be called out on it. So, think about for those individuals who are in leadership or management roles, where have you worked that was a great culture? Where have you worked that had bad leadership and a bad culture? This is not a secret. We just don't do it. So you worked somewhere you hated. What did you hate about it? Well, probably they were inconsistent. People weren't respected. Not they don't give me $100,000 bonus at the end of every year. That's really not what drives people. It's the little things are the big things. They want to spend time with their family. So let them and set some fair rules, and then let everybody do what they're supposed to do and enforce those rules fairly.
You mentioned a lot of great things in there. One of the things you mentioned was they don't want to see the slacker getting away with everything. And I was talking to you earlier about like kind of how we build culture and shape culture and some of the literal things we can do. And that jumped out at me as another potential talking point here, which is that does drive down morale and it does impact culture. And I wonder how often people think about that with respect to culture and your thoughts on, I don't want to say discipline, but performance improvement sort of thing, like that whole arena of culture.
Yeah, I think it's at least half of the problem because every work team has a stronger link and a weaker link, and most teams aren't so big that people have no idea what the other people are doing. They know who's pulling their weight and who's not. And so when we don't address that, then everybody's watching. And you take a good person, or better yet, four or five really solid performers on a team, and after months or years of watching, Johnny get by with something, they begin to think either one, I don't want to be here anymore. This is not fair. This is not right. Or why am I trying so hard? And I think there are reasons that are understandable that HR professionals maybe don't get to the level of managing performance, or better yet, the manager doesn't take it to HR and ask for help. I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing, or there's another component here that could sound like discrimination, or could sound like I'm prying into a medical issue, or any of these scary HR traps that nobody wants to run afoul of. But at the end of the day, we just have to have enough moxie to say right is right, wrong is wrong. We have rules and we're going to enforce them. We don't want to be abrupt, we don't want to be unfair, but frankly, there's no point in having rules if you're not going to enforce them. Same with expectations. So set an expectation that we as leaders can maintain. And if that's not the rule, don't say that's the rule, because we'll lose the respect of our employees, in my opinion. And they know that and they see that.
Do you have tips or thoughts on setting those expectations? Because I find there's times where when you talk to the manager or the leader, they're going, "Oh God, it should be crystal clear. I mean, they should know." And then the person's just constantly failing. And I sometimes look from the outside in and wonder, well, was it crystal clear and this person's just a colossal failure of a person? Or are we assuming it's clear and it's probably not? Or I don't know. I wondered, picking your brain a little bit on that disconnect.
I agree with you. I think disconnect is exactly the right word. I have joked with many managers in performance management training and said something ridiculous like this. Hey, listen up. This is really a big revelation. People perform better when you tell them what you want them to do. And they always laugh. And then I start to break down, okay, so tell me how you tell people. Well, we have a mission statement. Great. It's written on a wall somewhere and it's beautiful. I love the font. It's a great color of blue. You have a manual. That's also great. I like manuals. Did anybody dust it off and read it? Are we doing these things? And again, back to a human level. I hate to sound super simple, but these things are pretty simple. Did the leader, whoever it is, manager, supervisor, did they tell the person, here is what I want you to do? Do you understand what I'm asking? Okay, then I need to see that, and then give them a little baby deadline. On Friday, I want to see X,
Yeah.
whatever that is. If it's a production issue, writing a report, I want to see a draft. I need your report by Monday. I want to see your draft by Thursday at 4:30, and check in and give them feedback. And let's be honest with ourselves, this is difficult. It takes time. You already have a full-time job. Everybody's a working manager. HR people are busy. It is like parenting, it's more difficult to manage performance and really hold people's feet to the fire. But in the long run, it's the only way to continue to preserve a good culture and turn a bad one into a good one, because everybody's watching. And if we don't invest the time to do that, people notice and
I,
and they'll leave, or worse.
I agree. Yeah. That's the old joke, right? Like, what if I train them and they leave? It's like, well, what if you don't and they stay? So, your kind of decision here is it's like, what if, they're doing great and they leave me, and you're like, well, what if they get disgruntled and they just stay and they just,
Exactly.
half butt it for the rest of time? I'm curious about what you said in there. I thought was a really cool, you call it like a baby deadline or whatever. You're like, look, hey, by Friday, I want to see X, which is going to be a super bite-sized, just sort of movement in the right direction. And we're going to check in on you. And let's say they're doing that, but they just constantly regressing, right? So how do you kind of, how do you, I guess, balance when I feel like I've when I push them, then they'll do it, and then the second I take my hand off their back, they slip right back down to their, operating mean, which is not at the right level.
I think we're back to look people in the eye and have an authentic conversation. And what that means to me is at some point we have to say, look, I can't continue to parent you in this fashion. I'm trying to help, coach, whatever it is. If there's learning curve, I want to help you with that. But I can't spend this week reviewing last week all over again, and then on and on and on.
Yeah.
So tell them where the bar is. Here's what I expect. Okay, we've reviewed this. You understand it. I expect you not to regress. And here's what that means to me. I want you to build on it. And here's what that means. And just tell them very specifically what you can and cannot tolerate. And some workplaces, you might have more latitude than others to teach. The more of a niche it is, and it's specialized and difficult, you're probably going to invest more time as opposed to something general. At some point, maybe it's not for them or they're not trying and you got to cut them loose, but don't just say that. Then actually separate the person and don't let the rest of the team pick up the slack, because we as leaders don't want to take the time to fix it.
When you talk about that look them in the eye conversation and look, this is what we can do, etc., what are your thoughts on the levels involved in this? And let's say you've got a manager coming to their manager, a higher up, who maybe is quite adept at these types of conversations. And are we just deputizing the manager to go in and speak to the employee in what might be a lesser effective manner? Or how and when do we reach up the ladder and pull in the kind of, assuming that the in this analogy, the better communicators have worked their way up. So you've got a newer manager coming to you saying, I'm struggling with this employee. And you sort of give them the advice you just gave me. You go, well, you got to look them in the eye and you got to tell them what we expect. And they're just like, it ain't working, or I'm not delivering it right, or I don't know how to do that message. Like, when do we pull down?
It probably depends on the organization and their bandwidth. Anytime a leader has time to be really granular, go down a level or two, I think that's good for the organization, but they may or may not have the ability to do that. And depending on how many direct reports they have, I had a boss years ago and he used to say, I can meet or I can work, but I can't do both. And he's not wrong. There are things we have to get done in the day. So that's where our HR colleagues come in. Typically people, even newer entries to HR, are pretty good at people management and having conversations. So if it's not an option to go up the ladder because they don't have the bandwidth or frankly the interest, which is sometimes the case, then tap HR. And when in doubt, hey, just tell the person, maybe I'm not communicating this right. What I'm trying to say to you is I want you to work here. I don't see that happening long term unless we change your performance. Now, that's easy for you and I to talk about on your show. And I think it's hard, especially for younger, not chronologically young, but newer professionals to say. What I would say to all of the newer managers out there or newer HR people, yes, we make this look easy on the internet. Know that for you and I, even it was difficult in the beginning, right? So it does take practice, but you will get better at it. And if you're going to lead, this is an important part of it. We have to make ourselves do it. You don't have to be okay with it or like it, but you do have to be willing to have the tough conversations. Well, I'm afraid they'll get mad at me. Yeah, they probably will, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, it'll thicken your skin up to where it needs to be by the time you're a little more seasoned. I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much. We try to keep the conversation semi, what I call bite-sized digestible on here. So looking to kind of round the bend on actually getting out on time flies. Is there anything from your just years and years of expertise and honestly really great, wonderful wisdom here that we haven't quite touched on yet? Do you think, Toby, before we get out, I do think it'd be valuable to spend a minute or two on the following philosophy or thought or tip or nugget?
I just would remind everybody of the little things. I did, I practiced employment law of some variety for a very long time. It was rarely the big things. Very, very rarely. It was the little things. I'm talking about sitting in a deposition, hearing someone say, well, they never invited me to lunch, or no one ever said good morning to me. Now, in a certain context, that could sound petty, but if everyone else is friendly and collaborative, just think about what those little things are. And am I part of the solution or am I part of the problem? So when I come to work, what am I presenting? Regardless of what your job or title is, what am I contributing to the workplace? And, if I think everybody else is too fill in the blank, too happy or too this or too that, well, maybe you're the grouch and maybe you need a little work. So we have to be honest with ourselves.
I love the expression. Someone said, if you meet a jerk this morning, you met a jerk this morning. If you met four jerks this morning, maybe you're the jerk.
Exactly
Everyone you
right.
bump into is a problem. It's like, I don't know. Every once in a
Maybe
while,
not.
someone else is the
Yeah.
problem. But if it's always, then yeah, maybe you need to do a little self-reflecting. That's really great, Tommie Jo. Hey, if folks want to get a hold of you and they love your shade of blue, what's a good way to reach out and ping you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website. That's my name, TommieJoBrode.com, or they can go to VeniceSolutionsGroup.com. Either way, they can find me there.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you guys for listening. That is all the time we have on this week's episode. Thank you to our sponsors, Rula, Excel Health, True Hue, Montage Insurance Solutions. The guys keeping the lights on. We're blessed to be here. Watching the numbers go up every week, so thank you guys. Like, subscribe, share it, tell a friend. Keep growing. Keep helping folks like Tommie Jo come on and give you great advice. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.